Welcome back to the French Rugby Podcast with me, Tim Groves, ex-Scotland international and adopted Frenchman, Johnny BT, and a friend of the show with plenty to fill us in on. Will be joining us very shortly too. But speaking of filling people in, we've missed a couple of weeks, Johnny, so I should personally apologise for that absence. But not much has changed, has it, in the world of rugby or the real world? It's all the same, yeah?
A little bit's changed in your world. Do you want to fill us in?
We have had a baby a couple of weeks ago, and it's fair to say it didn't all go smoothly, but it's on the straight and narrow, we hope, now.
But Emmy became a big sister. Rafa's doing well. You're eating a pot noodle, which makes me realise that you're right back into the shit stage of being a dad again. And you mentioned it didn't go easy. Will there be a number 3? Is the vasectomy booked in already, or what were we thinking?
I did ask if they could do it there and then, but yeah, apparently that's not allowed.
And you must be like, it's not about you, Tim. It's not about you, Tim.
I don't think a third was ever on the cards, Johnny, but it definitely isn't now. It's safe to say. I've seen more than enough hospital over the course of the last couple of weeks. About 100 trips there and back, I reckon. But we've chatted a couple of times, but this is the first time you've seen me for a couple of weeks. So do I look 3 weeks older,
Fresh.
3 years older?
You're glowing, mate. Glowing. You're probably lactating. I've got no idea. Your dad bod is just going to get worse and worse. Take it from me.
How are you anyway? How are you?
Good, mate. It's been a nice. I can't remember the last time we actually did a podcast. It's been a nice couple of weeks break. Been working on Viaplay, who've taken over from Premier Sports. A couple of top 14 games. Everything's been good here. A couple of weeks of sort of downtime after the Autumn Nations, which is great. And then on to European stuff this weekend that I'm sure that we'll get to. But no, otherwise, mate, family's good. Rugby's been good. Looking forward to Christmas. Life is good.
And when I said nothing's changed, I kind of meant rugby rather than myself. But we will come on to the Champions Cup, get our guest on shortly. But we've got to touch on the dismissals of Eddie Jones and Wayne Pivac. Were they both the right calls for you or not?
Yeah, look, Gats clearly has been Wales's greatest ever coach. Like, incredibly hard to play against, horrible going down to play against his sides when he was Welsh coach. And I think that papered over cracks in the regional game at the time. As a national team, they've punched above their weight because they had a great coach. Now that he's gone, everything's gone loose. Pivac, though, you have to say, like, in his time, I thought they were going to be wooden spoon contenders. They won a Six Nations when he was there, but then since then, like, losing to Italy, losing to Georgia in Cardiff is tragic. And just sort of general form, it's all slipped, and confidence clearly isn't there. So 100% the right time to act. And in my opinion, the same again with Eddie. Like, bizarrely, though, if you look through the stats, like, he leaves as with the best win percentage of any England coach of all time. Got into a World Cup final, 3 Six Nations titles, 18-match winning streak, I think, at one point. But that was all before 2019. And since then, something just hasn't seemed right. It's not been settled. 5th in the 2021 Six Nations. Last year wasn't great either. Beaten at Twickenham by the Pumas. Embarrassed. I'm not sure that's a strong word, but I would say in certain facets of their game that they have real pride. Embarrassed by South Africa, and they just looked a little bit lost. So with all the players they have, the depth of talent, I think a breath of fresh air is probably just what they need as well. I actually thought Gats would have been an excellent shout as the next English coach as well. I saw Sam Warburton, I mentioned that this week as well. I thought he'd have been fantastic for them. Just to get them back to playing simple, basic rugby, what they do really well, getting those bits right and then building upon it. I don't know. We don't know who's going to come in and take that job 100% yet, but there's not many games for these coaches now. They have a Six Nations, a couple of warm-up games, then it's World Cup time. So you can imagine there won't be much tinkering, but they have to get in there, do a job, have an electro-shock, as they call it over in France, change something, get the players smiling again, full of confidence, and kick things off really quickly in the Six Nations, because it's going to come round like they've got, a month prep? If you're a coach now, you've got a month prep. You've got a week and a half, 2 weeks with the players. So much easier for Warren Gatland, more difficult for somebody coming into England, but probably now makes the Calcutta game kicking off that tournament a little bit harder now for Scotland going down to Twickenham, definitely.
Yeah, the Eddie Jones one seems to have split opinion a little bit more, given his talk of a grand plan for the last few years.
Remember, there's only so long you can, like, a grand plan, like, you're a test match coach, you're judged on the there and now. Like, it doesn't work like that. You can't produce absolute garbage for 2 years and say, don't worry, lads, it'll all be good in 9 months' time, it just doesn't fly. So I think it's the right decision. I know loads of people don't agree with me. A lot of players that he's coached as well, like you're not going to hear any former or recently former players or players that are still in the squad fighting for him. And clearly it's divisive. You guys like James Haskell coming out defending him, big ally, Mike Brown tearing him to shreds. But what is clear from the outside, not being attached to anyone in that camp or knowing Eddie Jones at all, is that the product, what they're producing on the field, isn't good enough. With the finance that goes in behind the player pool they have, they should be doing better. So change was required, according to me, but completely different for everyone else.
You mentioned he'd had the highest win percentage of any coach, which is absolutely factually correct. But you also mentioned it was all a few years ago.
It was all front-ended.
55% over the last 2 years as an England head coach. That clearly isn't good enough.
That's not acceptable. Not acceptable. And the weird thing is that although they were utterly dominant in some aspects of their play when he first came in, they've looked easy to play against, which is never something that you associate with an English side. Like, there's a Scotland side going down, looking to win at Twickenham for your first time since the 80s. Like, that's what we're talking about. Now you look at Calcutta, I'm using the Scottish example, but it's almost a 50-50 split over the past 3, 4, 5 years. And that has been historically almost impossible for us to achieve. So it's bizarre. His win percentage is still the highest, but it's been totally front loaded. And the reason that he's been removed is because the last 2 years it hasn't been acceptable. It hasn't been acceptable for an English national coach to have 55% win percentage. No way.
And from a French perspective, obviously, when Wales and England make these changes, everyone on social media says Sean Edwards, but we know he signed up for loads more with France. So there's no go there. But it's interesting, isn't it? There's all this upheaval and we're sort of in an alternate universe because everyone else is making changes. And if you're looking for serenity, France, it's not normally the case, is it?
It is bonkers. But then for the first time in a very, very long time, France have got a settled coaching staff that are performing with a generation of outstanding young players. So quite rightly, Sean has signed up for more. And I do not blame him. He's happy in Perpignan. He loves working with the French squad. I think he signed up for 4 more years. And that's it. It's even more wild that people back home, they have maybe don't have any idea that he's here or that he's doing a job or that he's re-signed, but he's here, he's happy, he's attached to a winning squad that's performing. They absolutely love him as well. They were desperate for him to re-sign, and he was quite right to do so.
Speaking of coaching changes, let's get our guest on now because there was one in the top 14 not so long ago as Christophe Urios exited stage left at Bordeaux, and we can have a chat with friend of the show, Zach Holmes, and find out how everything's going down there. How you doing, Zach?
Yeah, really good. It's nice to be back on. It's always listening to you boys every week, so it's good to see the podcast doing well and nice to be back chatting with you boys.
It's good to have you back, and it's been a while. A lot's happened since we last spoke, and I'm guessing it's been a tumultuous few weeks as well at the club. So give us a lowdown on how everything's unfolded.
Yeah, I think it was a bit of a surprise to everyone, all the playing group. So we had the match against Po, which is our worst match of the year, where we got beaten pretty badly, and then we sort of had the holidays after that straight away. So we had 10 days off, and then I think the decision was made just before we came back, so maybe the Monday or the Tuesday before we returned to training on the Wednesday. So we came back into training on the Wednesday. Christophe wasn't there. Fred and Julian, both the assistants, were taking sort of his role. And then we sort of just gone from there. We had a players sort of meeting on Wednesday night, sort of barbecue drinks to see, just what everyone thought about it, what changes needed to be made. The general consensus was, we not too much needs to change. We just need to, just a few things with our game, maybe a few things with the way we train as well. But overall, not too much. And we've sort of just continued on after.
And mate, so on those little things that you mentioned that you were going to change, a bit of a losing streak, not the start of the season you wanted, then obviously a big win at the weekend at home against Brive. Now that the assistants have stayed and they're running things, have you been able to have a bit of a collaborative environment where you go to them and say, look, as a player group, this is what we think, this is what we could tweak that would help? How's it working now that Christophe's been removed and he's no longer there? Because ultimately before he was controlling everything. now are you able to go to Julian and to Fred and to have a bit of back and forth? How does it work now?
Yeah, so Julian and Fred were pretty open from the beginning about what their expectations were, but they wanted to have an environment where the players and especially the leaders of the group are able to express what they want. I'm not saying without Christophe that didn't happen, because there's leaders meetings every Monday. There's a lot of different stuff going on, but I know that they made it clear that they want the players to express what changes, if any, that they need, or ways to improve. Not so much changes, but things we can do better. And you're always looking for that. So I'm not in all the leaders meetings, but yeah, a few of them that I have been in. Yeah, Fred and Julian are quite open to just our, I guess, the players' perspective of how we can train better, what we can do better in our games, and how we can incorporate that. And I think there's been some subtle changes, nothing too drastic, not anything system based on how we play, or not changing, I guess, the function of the week or anything like that. But a few subtle things, a few little changes on the way we train, focusing more on certain aspects. And I think hopefully as the season continues, we'll be able to see improvements with that in our game.
When you talk about the reaction of when you found out and then you went and digested it over a beer, were you fairly shocked? Because I'm like, as much as there might be short-term a blip with Christophe, you look at the success he delivered at Oyonnax, you look at what he did when I was there at Cast, took Bordeaux to the top 6 for the first time, got them to knockout phases of Champions Cup rugby. That had never been done at Bordeaux. So, like, is there a little bit of awareness from the boys of, shit, actually what comes in might not be better, and it might have just been a temporary little form thing, and this is actually a bit of a shock that he's now gone?
Yeah, well, I can only sort of say on my sort of perspective, and I've always looked at Christophe from the outside and seen what he's done, and always looked at him and been quite, well, he admired what he's done with the teams that he's coached, and then working with him for, well, not a long time, 4 months, but I really respected him as a coach, and I really found his management style to be really good for me. I found he's really direct. He lets you know what he expects. And he's clear with that. So for me personally, it was a big shock. We've underperformed, but we've still had good performances. The first match against Toulouse, we lost, which a match we probably shouldn't have lost, and we just haven't been able to pick up wins away. But you look at the table hard at the top 14 this season, like where everyone's on it's so tight. Po, Bayonne, they're not. You can't go there and just expect to win. Like Toulouse haven't. Like it's just so tight. So I think it was tough in that regard, but I'm sure there's more to it than just the results. But yeah, that's the president's decision, and at the end of the day, he's got to make the decisions on what he thinks best for the club going forward. He's done that, and as a playing group, we just need to up our performance. I think the group we've got in Bordeaux it's a good group. We are starting to probably play with a bit more confidence, and then hopefully, we're in the mix when it comes to the right end of the season. But yeah, it was a surprise to me. I think like most people in rugby, it was a surprise too. But yeah, it was, as we've seen with England, with Wales, sometimes those big decisions have to be made.
And was it mainly Christophe who brought you to Bordeaux, or did the negotiations that have happened above him? Because I wonder what it's like as a player who's just come into an environment expecting to obviously work with a coach for the long term, and then this happens. Do you feel quite sort of vulnerable, or?
Yeah, there is, because I knew that Christophe did sort of want me to be here and appreciate the way that I play. So when he leave, you're not certain who's coming in. I know that Fred and Julian will be here for the rest of the season, and then whoever comes after, you're not sure how they may view you. I know, with me signing here, it was Christophe and Fred as well, who I spoke to a few times before signing, and to be probably complementary to Matthieu in the same style, so they didn't have to, I guess, change game plans. Which, yeah, I guess Francois Chanduc played a bit of a different game, a bit more controlling, probably utilizing more, his kicking game and so that was sort of the reason. But yeah, there's always when a coach changes, you're not too sure how another coach is going to receive you. But all you can do is just control your performance, I guess.
And have you been told internally, I know it's not been announced as like a name that's floating around that everyone's talking about in France, but have they told you, right, boys, the situation is that these assistants are going to take you through to the end of the season, or is somebody going to come in and consult as a head coach till the end of the season, or then they're going to appoint somebody as a head coach at the start of next year? Like, do you know what the transformation period is going to look like, or is it just as it is for now for the rest of the season?
From my understanding, and from when the initial meetings were with Laurent and Fred and Julian, like they were taking over, and that was for the foreseeable future. I guess I see that as till the end of the season, but I guess that could change. But from the way I see it, it will stay the same until the end of the season. Yeah, and in terms of their roles, not much has really changed. In terms of Julian is with takes the forwards, Fred takes the backs, and then it just becomes more collaborative during the team meetings, where Julian has more of is focused on the defense, and Fred's focused on attack. So the way it functions is quite good. They just probably have to be a bit more. Probably not as close with the players. Oh, not so much that, but just now that they're more doing the selection of the match and stuff like that, becomes a little bit more complicated for them. But that's just part of the roles, and everyone understands that.
But mate, it is hard because Christophe, like certainly, like I had Fred and Christophe at cast, and like Fred is obviously as an assistant much closer to the players. It's backs as well, so you can all have a laugh. You don't have to do any hard training. It's all a laugh. But now having that flipped, like have you noticed, like have they had to flip a little bit of personality or create a little bit more distance or become a bit more colder? Because that was Christophe. Like Christophe was the chef that would stand up and would orchestrate everything and be that orator. And it was a big role. So it's a big void to fill as well.
To be honest, I haven't noticed them change the way they acted, I guess, with me before. Like I still talk quite a lot to Fred about just how training went, how strategy-wise, what I think, what Matthieu thinks, doing extra stuff with him after training. It's not really changed, and Julian's the same. Like I think Julian's probably taken on a bit more of the Christophe role in terms of the meetings and that kind of role. He's probably a bit more vocal, I guess, than Fred generally. But in terms of relationships personally, no, not really. I think they're both quite open. They're both wanting the players' input in how to best improve the team in terms of training, in terms of strategy for the match, in terms of the way that we want to play the game. So I think they see this as a big opportunity for the both of them as well to show what they can do in a sort of bigger scheme, I guess. So I think it's not ideal the way it's happened, but it's an opportunity, and the players know we're not even halfway through the season, and we've sort of spoken a little bit about it. It's not a rebuilding year. It's not a saison blanche. We still want to achieve stuff this year, and we believe that we can.
And Johnny, we can't put Zach on the spot about this. Obviously, it hasn't been told.
Yeah, we can.
We can put you on the spot anyway. Zach, you can chime in as well. But you mentioned there's a name out there. It's Yannick Bru that the French media are talking about for next season.
Yeah.
So you can tell Zach. What about Yannick Bru, Johnny?
Well, I don't know if it's actually been signed. Like I actually bumped into him randomly about 10 days ago in Bayonne. So he was back on a break because he's out with the Sharks working as like a defense consultant. But he was like, mate, I'm just there learning. Like I'm just there absorbing, trying to absorb as much as I can because they play some pretty good rugby. But he's the man that's been associated with the role. And he was our coach at Bayonne. But in terms of like pure hands-on coaching, like I see Yannick as more as like a director of rugby. Like he's more of a manager, like not a spokesperson, but He's like a really good speaker. He's up for management relational pieces, like that liaison with the president, with the community, with the like everything that goes around. Like I wouldn't say he's a real hands-on rugby coach, but he's a good like head of an organization, if that makes sense. Do you know, like, so like I would say like at that comparison, like Christophe is more hands-on with his rugby stuff. And Yannick is much more like he is that man that's front and center and speaking and leading the sort of image of the club, if that makes sense. But he's the man that's been associated with the lead role. It'll be really interesting to see as well if he brings in different assistants or if that changes or how much change he wants to make. I know the press had also mentioned Thibaut Giroud, who he was meant to be at Racing, but there was a sort of difference in how they saw that direction with Stuart Lancaster. So he's been released from that contract. So he now can be back on the market as well. He potentially go work with Yannick at Bordeaux. So like it's an interesting one because I think Yannick needs strong assistant coaches as well with him for the pure technical rugby side of the game. So it'll be really interesting to see how it all unfolds, who comes with him, if he is the man for the job, and then what direction the club goes in when he arrives.
We don't know if it's confirmed or not, but there's the lowdown.
He's here next week, so we might say
exactly. That's it. They're coming to town, so you'll take him for an entrecote and a glass of wine. Like, mate, like you haven't arrived yet, but if you could just sort this extension for me, Christophe's got me here, but let's get me here long term. But yeah, mate, that'll be really interesting for him as well. And that's happening with loads of coaches. Like Lancaster's playing against Racing with Leinster this weekend. You've got Yannick coming from with the Sharks, over from Durban to play against you guys. So some pretty tasty games coming up.
And just quickly on Christophe before we move on, you mentioned you didn't really get a chance to work with him for that long, but he is a character, isn't he? And we had some Bordeaux guys on at the end of last season, and particularly in the build-up to that barrage game, Johnny, we spoke to Kane Douglas, didn't he? And he sort of said he'd famously kind of left the players to it for a week to just sort of crack on and said, I'm not having this. I'm not happy with what's been going on. You sort it out. And they did sort it out. So did you notice anything kind of a bit off the wall about Christophe in the early stages of this season, or did he give players the hairdryer treatment, or what did you make of him overall?
To be honest, I think he took the end of last season quite hard, quite difficult for him. And it felt like, speaking to some of the guys that have been there during the whole time, like it was more open in terms of even the way that the weeks were set up. Like there'd be sort of in each block there'd be a week that would be driven by the players. So for one of those weeks I was injured. So I did all the sort of I think it was against Stade Francais, and the players had the responsibility of doing all the video, all that, presenting in the meetings and stuff like that. And I found that quite interesting because that's something I kind of looking to get into. So for me, it was quite good. But he was quite open in that regard, letting the players do things like that. I didn't notice it being like really totalitarian or controlling, or to me, if the environment felt quite good, even though performance-wise we weren't probably doing as well as they had done in previous years. So for me, it is surprising, but there's probably more going on below the surface to why. But I guess it's sad, but I'm sure he'll be back at another club, and he's been successful for a long period of time. So I'm sure he'll continue to coach and coach well.
If anything, it just shows us how finite the margins are. From, like we were talking about Eddie Jones earlier. So Eddie Jones, highest win percentage of any England coach to a World Cup final. Then the sort of relationship pieces, the wheels come off a little bit. A few matches don't go right, and you find yourself like Christophe's the same. Like I really enjoyed his environment at Cast. A good man. A few personal things that maybe went wrong with calling people out in the press at the end of the season, whether that has an effect on like the overall image, and then a few results. Like the margins are so small in the top 14. Like you guys are 8th. It's not like you're 14th. Another 2 wins back to back and you're into top 6 and everyone's happy again. But I think it just shows us, like, no matter if you're Wayne Pivac, Eddie Jones, Christophe Urios, that little fine line is so fine now. And it's ridiculous how quickly people can get turfed out of a job. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It feels almost a little bit more like football. Like it's almost, if they want to change the environment or they need to make a change, which, I guess it's a results-based thing. You've only got a limited amount of time. So, but it's hard on the coaches.
And on that line, like talking about the Wales and England teams, like just 9 months out from World Cup, as an Aussie, what do you make of Eddie Jones being removed? Do you think that is the right call to have taken him out of post from now? Like, do you think he did have a master plan that RFU have lost it and they'll never get the World Cup back? Or do you think it was the right thing?
I guess time will tell if it's the right thing or not. I'm interested in who replaces him. I think when you look at the options, you look who got people who are just like extended contracts and unavailable. There doesn't seem like there's too many coaches that are available at the moment. So I'm interested in what direction England go. I guess the major thing for me, Eddie Jones has produced it almost every World Cup he's been at. So you have to say he knows what he's doing. So yeah, it's a surprise in that regard. I guess England's they expect results. They want good performance. So we'll see what happens at the World Cup, I guess. But yeah, I'm interested in what direction they go in and who they appoint to coach because it's close to a World Cup. So yeah, it's interesting.
And as an Australian, could you see Eddie Jones going back and helping Australia at the World Cup potentially? Or if they do make a change either before or after that, heading back to Australia as a head coach one day?
I don't know. You don't know with Eddie, do you? You don't know what he's what he's going to do. Yeah, potentially, but he could just as realistically end up helping France. So,
or being your coach next year, Zach, at Bordeaux. How about that?
Imagine.
Yeah, he could be here next season for all I know. But that'll make. I don't know how he'd go in France. That would be a long season. Yeah, I don't know how my body would take that, but I think consultancy wise, I guess. I'm not too sure who he's got close relationships. Other coaches, I know he's worked with Jake White before the World Cup, but he always had a relationship with him. So I'm not too sure. I can't see it, but I guess his intelligence, his knowledge of not just rugby, but even teams who potentially could come against England, it could be an advantage.
I don't know if it's just media talk, Johnny, but before Stuart Lancaster got the Racing job, there was links between Eddie Jones and Racing. So it's not beyond the realms of possibility that we could see him in the top 14. No, you never know.
Not at all. I like silly things float around social media as well. Like he was linked with an 8-year contract to America, but I'd much rather see him in Bordeaux looking after Zach and just getting him through those training sessions. I think that'd be amazing.
Yeah. I think his accent's worse than mine, so it probably wouldn't be too bad to have some. It'd be pretty funny having him screaming at the French boys to get off the ground and move around a bit more. It'd be hilarious, but yeah, personally can't see it happening.
A complete tangent, but I messaged you earlier in the week about your scrum half as well, Jan Lesgorg, who came off a scooter after a social, broke his jaw outside the stadium. Like, how is he getting on? Surely he's getting ridden by the boys for being a muppet, but more importantly, how is he feeling? Is he recovering all right?
Yeah, I haven't got too many updates. I think he had to have surgery and stuff straight after. He's okay now, like he's out of hospital and stuff. It was pretty serious. He's fractured his jaw. I think he's got some damage to his shoulder or elbow as well, like a fracture there. So yeah, the president spoke to us on Monday about it briefly, the doctor as well. It's pretty crazy. It's an incident that didn't need to happen. But I guess when you take that risk, it's not good. But yeah, he's put himself in that position, and unfortunately, it's happened. And thankfully, it's not worse than it is. But yeah, I think he's going to be missing for quite a while, which is a shame because. For me, he's a really good 9. He's probably not had as much opportunity at the beginning of the season with Max playing quite a lot and Max playing well. But yeah, it's a shame, and it makes and for the club it's difficult as well because we've lost a 9 for quite a few months now, and it's a position that is not that easy to come in France at the moment as well.
Which leads me nicely into my next question. In France, we've seen Jean-Baptiste Elissalde, Benoit Payog, Antoine Dupont can all play 9 and 10. Are we going to see Holmes lining up in a 9 jersey for Bordeaux over the next few months?
I don't know. I thought Santi played a little bit. Santi Cordero played a bit last year, so he might be putting his hand up first. But I've never, like, my dad was a halfback. He played he played for Waikato. He played quite a few like ITM, and I started playing halfback, and then he'd just give me too much advice, so that's why I moved more 10 and sort of a bit further out, because I didn't want to have to. I was like, well, you never played 10, so you can't really tell me what to do. But yeah, it's not something. Yeah, it's not something I would say no to. I've never trained there or anything like that. But if it got to the stage where it needed to happen, I wouldn't say. I'd put my hand up, but hopefully it doesn't get to that.
Because it just shows as well. Like I saw Rory Cockett, my old mate from Cast,
Yeah.
who's now coach, has had to be added back to the European roster to potentially fill, because they can't get a medical joker. Like there's no nines available. So, mate, stranger things have happened. If Rory's getting dragged in as a backs coach, now playing back at 9, which you'll absolutely love, there's a good chance that you'll get roped into that. Yeah, you'll be loving
it. Yeah, it's strange. I think as well, yeah, it's not the easiest time of the year, and even just, I think Julian spoke a little bit about it in the press, like even with the GIF and non-GIF stuff, it's not easy just to recruit a non-GIF and bring him in just with our numbers and stuff like that. It's become more difficult, I guess, like with the non-GIF quota, the GIF quota's not going up, but higher than they were previously. You have to be a bit more strategic with that. So yeah, the timing of the injury is not good. I hope his recovery is okay. I know from the initial reports, it's a very serious accident, and hopefully, we don't suffer any more injuries at halfback.
And given what happened to him, I don't know how you get around Bordeaux, Zach, whether you've got a Ferrari or a Peugeot, I don't know. No, but have they not yet. But has there been any chat of, geez, guys, get a taxi? No scooters. Have they banned scooters, or is it just one of those freak accidents?
So it was a bit of be a bit more aware, a bit more careful, I guess. I do have a scooter. I don't really take it out as soon as it gets cold. So that's just me personally being a bit of a princess. But I guess I know, like now it is in France, but like in Bordeaux, it's like the last 2 weeks it's cold now. And the risk of even just like the black ice and stuff at that time, 4 or 5 a.m. in the morning, there's always a risk of that. So yeah, you got to be careful. But yeah, going out after, I guess the decision's probably not the best decision to make. But yeah, it's a bit of a wake up call, not just to all of us, but all the players generally. Like, you can't take. I guess 9 times out of 10, you're okay, but when it happens, it's not good, and it's thankful that he's not done more damage, I guess, than that.
And from a scrum half to a fly half, you mentioned him earlier on, Matthieu Jalibert. You were signed because you're a similar style of player. He beat about 100 defenders at the weekend, ridiculous numbers. Give us an idea, as someone who's in a similar mold to him, obviously, what's he like on and off the field, and how good is he? No,
I really enjoy my relationship with Matthieu. I think first of all, he's a unbelievable player. He's a confident player. He probably can get perceived a little bit negative in the press and by other people, but he backs himself, and that's something I admire. He backs himself to beat players, to take players on. He uses his abilities, and not everything works, but if you don't try anything, like, nothing works. So I think I admire his confidence, his mentality to take the game on. I sort of had a bit of a relationship before. We used to message each other and stuff on Instagram, and I think he gave me a vote of confidence to come here as well. So I know he's got quite a big sort of pull at the club, or he's a big player at the club. So it was good that I had some kind of relationship with him before, and working with him, it's been good. He works hard. He wants to improve. He wants to be the number 110 in France, and I think he probably didn't have the start to the season he wanted, but since sort of the back end before the Autumn Nations and his sort of appearances off the bench there and coming back from that, he's in really good form, and that's important for Bordeaux to have him in form, because he is a bit of a barometer, I guess, to the overall team performance.
That all sounds really positive, but I've heard one negative story about him. Is it true his dog is called Owen after Owen Farrell?
Yeah, I don't know if it is about. I know his dog is Owen. I don't know if that's is it.
Tragic.
I can't confirm or deny, but yeah.
You can confirm tomorrow morning. You can ask him when you go in.
Yeah, he's on holiday. He's on holiday this week, so yeah, he's actually lucky. Yeah, because yeah, so we'll see when he gets back.
Speaking of Englishmen, Zach, you've had Tom Willis and Gabriel Ogre come in from Wasps. So how are they settling in? What are they like? Have they had to do any initiations, or do they escape because they're last minute additions?
Yeah, we've got Tom's here at the moment. I don't know when Gabriel can't. He's not here at the moment. I think he comes January maybe, or the end of the year. But yeah, so Tom's been here. He arrived, I think, on the Wednesday we came back. So yeah, first day here. Christophe just been fired.
Holy shit.
Not the ideal start. Trying to get everything organised and stuff. You got the meetings with the president, the coaches meetings where you understand nothing. So it'd just be like, what is going on? But no, he's been really good. He's adapted to the way we play. He asks questions. I've sort of, just gone through the way, the strategy and shape and stuff like that. And I know he's the other, like Jondre and Kane helped him out with the line outs, and he's picked it up really quick. He's settled in now, and it's good to see. Yeah, it's good to have him, another addition to the back row. I think I didn't know too much about him. I knew probably a bit more about his brother, but no, he's a good ball carrier. He got some good minutes on the weekend. One of the Pierre Bouchard was injured, but yeah, he played really well, and I think it's a good addition to have him. I think he's settling well. He's really enjoying it. I spoke to him a little bit. We had a Christmas party last night. Spoke to him a little bit there, and he's settled in really well. So yeah, hopefully it continues and we can keep him for longer than just this season as well.
So no head shavings yet. That's what we're saying.
No. He came in a good time. You just sneak in midway through the season, and yeah, there's no real time to get your head shaved. So yeah, that was well played.
And you mentioned the Christmas parties. That we should ask you about that. Where was it? What happened? Was it quiet?
There wasn't much to report. It was like with families as well. So it was at it's in Bordeaux, so it was at a chateau. Probably was not big enough for the event, but everyone was crammed in a bit. Kids running around, bumping into old people, but no, it was good. We all had to bring a plate. So I think most of the boys ended up just rushing off to the boulanger and picking up something just before on the way. So there was probably 3/4 desserts, 1/4 mains and entrees. But no, it worked. Nothing, not too much. The kids got all their presents, and yeah, it was a good night.
And a bit of a change of pace for you this week. Obviously, things are more so back on track after that win, top 14, back up to 8th. This week, you now cut and it's European rugby. So what is the vibe in camp and the attitude towards European rugby? Like a big game away from home, Gloucester first up. What are you expecting, and how's everyone feeling generally?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a tough game against Gloucester. They've been performing well in the Premiership. We had a focus after the break of those two games against Perpignan and Brive in the position we were in. Now moving into the Champions Cup, I think we want to start well in the competition. We know it's important. It's a 4-game competition. If you need to attack this first game, you need to play well. We don't want to go over there and put in a performance that we're not happy with. So we're going there to play well. We want to win the game and continue to build confidence. We know if we don't show the respect to this competition or don't prepare well enough and play bad in these next 2 games, it's going to be very difficult to come back into the top 14 and play well as well. So we're using these games to continue our season, to build confidence, to build a performance to do well in the Champions Cup, but also to prepare for the games in the top 14 as well. It doesn't get any easier, but we're taking this as a 5 block sort of window. So we got the 2 Champions Cup games and then 3 sort of games leading up to the new year.
And when we had you on the show before, Zach, I remember you saying you were kind of building up to taking your French citizenship test. So how did it go? Have you got it? Are you a fully fledged French citizen?
No, I am. Everything's done. That was all finished. Did my final interview in June. Yeah, before I went back to Oz. So everything's done. Submitted. So now I think the paperwork's in on, and I'm waiting to. So it's been about 4 or 5 months, and I'm waiting to hear that everything's a-okay. But yeah, for me it wasn't too bad. My wife, we did it at the same time, and it was a lot more complicated. She's born in Singapore. Trying to get the stuff from the Singapore embassy was ridiculous. But yeah, so it's all done now, and we're just waiting for the passports to arrive. So fingers crossed it's not too long.
Mate, I had a message from a mate of yours, so Big Manny Miafu at Toulouse last week, and he was like, "Hey Johnny, just checking in. I've got my interview for my passport on Friday." This is like Wednesday night. He messages me. Is there anything I should look at? Before I was like, "Oh mate." So I sent him through like links to PDFs with like 100 questions on what you need to know for your naturalization. I was like, "Oh mate, get studying, get cramming." He's like, "Oh, I'm sure we'll be okay." So I'll check in with him. Fingers crossed it went all right, but it's a grilling, eh?
Hopefully he gets the same guy I had in Toulouse, because he was actually really nice.
I thought, oh, you play for Toulouse? Yeah.
You got to start with that. It wasn't too bad. Like I done preparation. Like, you can always prepare more. There's so much stuff that they can ask you, and I was just hoping for the best. But yeah, it wasn't. The person I had was, he was good. He could have made it a lot worse for me. I know my wife, it was a little bit more difficult, but she was okay. She was more prepared, as women usually are. But yeah, I think it's a bit of a lottery who you get, but I'm assuming he's doing it in Toulouse. I'm pretty sure that they should appreciate rugby, so I'm sure it'll be fun.
Not just that, Johnny. Knowing Fabien Galtier, Manny could be quite useful to him, so he might have had a word as well.
Yeah, he probably might be taking the test. Might be doing the interview.
I was like, Manny, just get down there in your full Toulouse tracksuit. If that all fails, get on the phone to Macron. That worked for Max Van Dijk.
Yeah, I wish I did that.
And so, mate, you're like French Penn's passport, and then you're also in the middle of your qualifications. You did one last year coaching. You've got another one to do next year, which Jerome is also in the middle of doing his. Is the plan eventually to try and French citizenship and stay, or would you like to head back home at the end of your career? What are you thinking?
Yeah, like the reason for getting my passport is to want to stay in France. It wasn't a necessity. I've got my UK passport. I've got a 10-year visa here as well, but I want to stay in France. That's why I'd like to get as much of my coaching stuff done while I'm still playing, if possible. So yeah, I've done my sort of first level one while in Toulouse, my BP Jeps, and I want to start my DO Jeps next year. But yeah, the ideal situation for me to stay in France and coaching something I would like to do. I'm doing a little bit of stuff at the moment, just with the some of the girls, the French 15 and the 7s, and just doing some kicking skill stuff there, which I've only done a little bit of, which I'm quite enjoying, because that's an area I'd sort of like to get into, that skills kicking side of things. But yeah, that's something I'd like to do post rugby, and it gives me a reason to stay in France, I guess. So yeah, that's where my head's sort of at, and I'm hopeful to get as many of my qualifications done while I'm still playing, so it makes that transition easier, I guess.
You've got plenty of years still playing left, Zach, but Johnny mentioned if it is Yannick Brew next season at Bordeaux, he's more of a director of rugby type. He's there next week in a different capacity with the Sharks. Just buy him a coffee, a nice steak or something. You could have a player coach role next year. Who knows?
Yeah. Oh, that wouldn't be too bad. But yeah, who knows? Who knows? But I think, yeah, I don't know too much about Yannick, but hopefully, I don't know who's going to take over, but yeah, play coach. I think there's enough going on just playing. I think I sort of see how the coaches work. I've sort of even just watched Jerome last year and seen the difference. So doing it both at the same time.
Mate, yeah, just stay a player as long as you can.
The salary was up there. I don't know how appealing it would be. Yeah, I'm not sure my wife would appreciate it either.
Mate, before you go, quickly, I have to ask you, like, your first trip over to Kingsholm with the boy, like, what are you expecting over there? and how are you going to win it? Like, big weekend, first game European rugby. What is going to be key for you going over to England and starting positively? Because weirdly, I reckon a lot of teams or French teams now with the travels to South Africa and further afield, if they don't get those first 2 games right, I reckon they'll throw in the towel and chuck in bomb squad. So going over this weekend, what do you boys need to get right to knock over Gloucester?
Yeah, it's not an easy place to play. I've actually played there quite a few times. I had them in my pool twice in the Challenge Cup at La Rochelle, once at Toulouse in the Champions Cup. So this is the 4th time I played them over there. And for an English team, like, the atmosphere is, yeah, it's quite vibrant. It's very loud, especially the shed.
Cool.
Like, it's different to, it's got a bit more of a French feel to it, I guess, in the way the crowd gets involved in the game. So I guess as a French team, as a visiting team, you want to take the crowd out of it. So it's important to start well. Gloucester, I guess, since George Skivington's taken over, has had a real big focus on their maul and the dominance that has, scoring tries off their maul, penalties off their maul. So for us, it's important to not give them the opportunity to use it. Whether that's discipline, not giving them penalties, keeping the ball in field as well. So we have a strategy that we want to go over there and play with. It's not going to be easy to implement. Gloucester, they're going to attack the competition. They're in good form, so it's important for us to start the game well and to not. I guess even if it's not going well, the way the format is, you got 4 games and 4 try bonus point and the losing bonus point. I think it's important to continue to play in this competition. And even if you're not getting the 4 points, 2 points can be important. 8 teams go through out of 12. So for us, we have the mentality to go out and win the game, but to also continue to play for that 80 minutes and make sure that we bring back as many points as we can.
Well, thanks so much for coming on, Zach, and sharing your insight into everything going on in Bordeaux, and good luck in the West Country this weekend.
Pleasure. Thanks, guys. And thanks for having me on again.
Pleasure, mate. Catch you soon. Cheers, Zachy.
Cheers, boys.
Always good to chat to Zach, Johnny, and very interesting on Christophe as well.
Yeah, he's a really good boy. And again, I think that's just what people want to hear, is that it's not Christophe's a bad egg, or he's a fucking good coach. Like that's the honest. And that's what comes across with Zach. There's just been certain things or things that have been spoken about or verbalized that have gone down wrong. And there's been a clash somewhere behind the scenes that we still don't know the full ins and outs of. But I'm fairly sure that Christophe will rebound quickly with a big club. And he'll be coaching somewhere come June, preparing another preseason and doing a decent job. But for Bordeaux, and for Zach, like a big job now to, with just the assistants, get them back into the top 6 and get them competing again, whilst also managing European rugby. But yeah, awesome to have him on. Great lad. And yeah, hopefully he'll come back on soon.
Right, we're not going to chat too much about the top 14 this week because we're coming out a bit later in the week than usual. And it's all about the Champions Cup build-up. But we do definitely need to find out what your meter moment of the week.
So it could have been Matthieu Jalibert. You mentioned how many defenders. He beat something like 30 by himself. He's a freak show. But I'm going for a team performance. There's only one away victory at the weekend. I was working on that game for Viaplay again, doing the commentary, and it was Racing, mate. They went down to Toulon, absolutely written off, no chance, but full of intensity. Defensively, they were phenomenal. Their line out made Charles Olivon and Toulon's look like a shambles. My old mate Baptiste Chouzenu running the show from Bayonne now at Racing. But they came away with a really gritty victory. So meter moment of the week was Racing, the smash and grab in Toulon, and the only away win of the weekend. They were awesome.
There we go. That was Johnny's meter moment of the week. And Meter is the world's #1 wireless meat thermometer, recently making over 20 million cooks better with their game-changing app and completely wireless Bluetooth meat probe. You can use it on a barbecue, in the oven, or in a pan, and you can get your hands on one at meter.com. Plus, you can now get 20% off any full price item. All you have to do is enter the code FrenchPod20 at checkout. That's FrenchPod20, and you'll get 20% off any full price item at meter.com.
Perfect for Christmas.
Absolutely. Maybe not on the barbecue, unless you're where you are, Johnny. It's probably 1,000,000 degrees still over there.
I'm struggling. I'm battling for Christmas presents this year. And and I've just bought 2 meters. There you go. I've used that discount code. I've bought 2 family members. They'll be getting them in their stocking, and they're actually quality.
So we won't talk about the top 14 on the pitch, but off the pitch, plenty going on. Will Rowlands to Racing. Joe Marchant, we've spoken about before, confirmed to Stade Francais. And Luke Cowan-Dickie to Montpellier is probably the most interesting one, Johnny, because he's kind of in his prime and definitely in England's top 2 hookers. So it's a big move.
Also looking at the fact that Eddie hasn't used many hookers at all. So who's coming in behind him? But you mentioned it's a big money move. He couldn't turn it down. A huge move for his family. Will Rowlands as well to Racing. You've got to imagine that's the same. The interesting point for him now is he doesn't qualify like Dan Biggar does. Dan Biggar's got 100 caps. Again, his introduction at Toulon at the weekend was incredible. Took the microphone with the president on the field, spoke perfect French, addressed all the Toulon fans. They absolutely love him already, and he hasn't touched the ball. But for Will Rowlands, it's going to be interesting. Are the Welsh Union going to change that rule and allow him to come back or not? We'll wait and see. A big move for Joe Marchant. I'm pumped for him that he's gone to Stade Francais because they're flying as well. And Luke Cowan-Dickie, as we said, like too much money to turn down. A big reflection as well on the Premiership, the money problems that are going, the salary cap coming down. Like these boys are just the start. Like Will coming from the Welsh Federation, but Luke Cowan-Dickie and Joe coming over along with Dan Biggar is the start of, I think, what we'll see to be a lot of signatures happening in the next 2 months.
Given the changes happening in Wales with Warren Gatland going back, it'd be very interesting to see if that 60 cap rule has changed. A lot of people think it will be, but there's no sense that it's going to change in England. So therefore, those 2 moves, Luke Cowan-Dickie and Joe Marchant, at their age, particularly interesting.
But you have to protect your domestic product. Like take Wales, for example, like with their regions, if they let the top 10% leave, and I understand letting them leave, but what does that leave you with in Wales? What does your domestic product give you? Can you get bums on seats to come watch what essentially will become academy teams? Because the difference between them and Scotland with the same sort of player numbers, Wales just ahead, is that Scotland filled 2 professional teams. So the sort of talent is still there. When you spread that over 4, it becomes a little bit more sparse. So they've got a real challenge to keep as much as they can, whilst also allowing key players to go and pick up big salaries elsewhere. So it's really tough for them. And England's the same, mate. Even though they've lost 2 sides, the Premiership has to protect its product. It has to ring fence itself and look after domestic talent and get them playing English rugby. So it's attractive for people to come and watch and buy tickets, because like domestic ticket sales in the Premiership are down 10 to 15% this year. So they need to make it as attractive as possible for punters to come and be part of our game.
And we spoke about Eddie Jones earlier on. It looks like Steve Borthwick is very much going to be the man to replace him, although not confirmed yet, obviously. One man who sort of threw his own hat into the ring like not so long ago and then has subsequently taken it out. Ronan O'Gara is very much staying at La Rochelle, isn't he?
Well, he signed an extension to 2027. And that's one of the things with Rog is that he doesn't shy away or answer questions dishonestly. Again, Popelan, the 10 who's leaving the club this year, spoke in the press this morning about how, like, love him or hate him, you get a direct answer no matter what the question is. Some people find that really hard to deal with. But obviously, if you ask Rog, how would you feel about coaching an English side? Yeah, it'd be a great job. Like, why wouldn't that be a great job? One of the biggest unions in the world. Of course, it'd be a great job. But for him now and for La Rochelle, crucially, after winning that Champions Cup, being consistent across both competitions that they're involved in, developing some serious talent from within as well, it's a great to tie him down. To have him there for the next 4 seasons is a massive coup for La Rochelle.
So let's focus on the Champions Cup then. I suppose out of the French sides, they look fairly strong and looking at some of the fixtures, but who, if you were going to call it now, is going to win it?
Let's start outside France. Leinster again. Watched them last weekend beating Ulster with 14 men. A magical comeback. Mate, they're just freakish every year. When you think, yep, you watch that game, yep, they can do that with 14 men. They can take on anyone in Europe. Saracens played 9, won 9 in the Prem, head and shoulders above everyone else at the minute. And then you look at the South African teams coming in, which is a total wild card because not many teams know that much about them in France, but I wouldn't bet against either the Bulls or the Stormers. Like, I'm not sure how that would go down with punters generally if they were to win the European Cup. And then domestically, you look at France, La Rochelle and Toulouse absolutely leading from the front. I don't think Racing have the strength they maybe had a couple of seasons ago. Guys like Vakatawa moving on, a few different reasons. I just think they maybe don't have the punch that they did. My wild card would be Montpellier. The fact that they've got London Irish and the Ospreys in their pool stage means that they should fly through and get a decent seeding in the next round. But realistically, mate, there's 5, 6, 7 teams. Like Zach mentioned as well, the top 8 sides go through. So I've got no idea. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm
one
really
of those 8 or something you mentioned there, eh? Yeah,
exactly. But like that's the beauty of it. Again, you look at World Rugby, the international scene that we've talked about. It's so much more entertaining and interesting because any team on their day can beat anyone, and I think that really is the same with the Champions Cup at the minute. If you've got 8 to 10 teams across the board, that really any one of them could pip it. So no, looking forward to kicking off this weekend. It should be class.
And apart from Zach and Bordeaux's trip to Gloucester, what are the pick of round 1's games?
Racing v Leinster will be absolutely huge and a real experience for Stu Lancaster. Like, I know he's obviously been over and seen around the installations and the training ground but to be there coaching for Leinster against your future team will be pretty special mentally. Obviously, we know he'll be doing his job and he'll be Leinster coach, but emotionally it'll be interesting for him and pretty cool for the fans to watch as well. Munster Toulouse, who've had some massive battles over the past few seasons. Jerome couldn't join us because he's been asked to do extra prep for that game on a Monday night. And I'll be at La Rochelle, Northampton for BT, which I'm looking forward to as well. Hopefully catch up with Big Greg Aldrich for beer after that one as well. So, mate, the opening weekend, there's a few massive rounds to look forward to, all on BT Sport. So looking forward to them starting.
Absolutely. Thanks, Johnny. A big thanks to Zach Holmes for joining us as well. And thanks to all you guys for listening. Make sure you hit subscribe, leave us a nice review if you can. Check us out on Rugby Pass and on YouTube. And we'll be back with another episode next week. Au revoir, Johnny.
Cheers, everyone.